That would be fab. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our cover design and illustration chat with the very wonderful Natalie Smillie and the totally amazing Tim Budgen. They're going to talk to you today about how they do it, how they do their process of illustrating for children's books, and they're also going to give you some tips and hints about how to get into it if it's something that you're interested in. If you have any comments for Natalie and Tim, please put them in the ask a question box down the bottom. I will be moderating the questions, so I'll be able to see them coming up, and I will ask them to Natalie and Tim as they go through. We will also have time at the end for questions. So if your question doesn't get asked initially, don't worry, there will be time. We have factored that in. As you know, the conference is free and trending on Twitter at the moment, which is very exciting. But we are trying to raise some money for Seven Stories. If you didn't catch the Seven Stories session yesterday with John Beattie from Seven Stories, it's well worth a look to see the brilliant work that they do to help children's literacy, to encourage reading for pleasure, and also they hold the archives for biggest archives for children's literature to stop it from going into private collections. I think this afternoon, we're going to get to see some original Mog illustrations, which I'm very excited about. So do give that a check out if you're about, or watch it back. And if you can donate to Seven Stories, please do. The donate button is below. So that's my bit over. Do feel free to interact and talk in the chat and in the questions. And I'm going to hand you over to Natalie and Tim.
Hello. Tim, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you can go first, Natalie, if you like.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm Natalie Smillie. I'm a children's book illustrator. I've been doing it for a few years now. And I thought it might be helpful to kind of tell everybody how we got started and what the method for getting into the business worked for us. I actually left school when I was 16 and joined the art college here in Plymouth and picked a multimedia course, which I ended up hating with a passion for some reason. I think it was just the wrong thing for me. And I left, joined the RAF on a whim when I walked past the recruiting office one day, and stayed in there for a few years. And then when I left, I did a few kind of admin jobs, and I was drawing throughout the whole time I was working. So it's not like I stopped drawing, but I didn't do it quite as much. And then I did a few kind of courses. Tim and I actually both did the same London Art College course. It's a long distance book illustration course, which we both recommend. So after I kind of did all that, I went back to college and studied for a HND in visual communication, which I think I probably just annoyed all my lecturers, because every single brief, even though it was supposed to be a graphic design brief, was somehow magically turned into an illustration brief. So I think I just realised that illustration was the way I wanted to go. So I put together a portfolio, had a look at what everybody was doing, put together a portfolio, and found an agent, and then just kind of went on from there, really. And never stopped drawing, never stopped painting, never stopped seeing what everybody else is doing, and being inspired by the people, I suppose. But yeah, that's how I got into it. Tim?
Yeah, similar in a way. I've been teaching. I was an art teacher up until I went part-time in 2017. But I started really, doing drawing, cartoons, everything since I was at school. My great-grandfather was an artist and painter for the Daily Sketch. I think I've shared some on Twitter, some of his books. So this one he did in 1956 or something like that. So he was my inspiration. So this is the only thing I have left of him.
I love that.
And it's falling apart a little bit. But I used to kind of pore over this as a kid. And this is obviously back in the day when everything was hand painted traditionally. So it's got a lovely, really kind of cool 50s vibe. So I had that, and I was poring over as a kid and growing up and just doing loads of art and drawing lots of Disney stuff. And then I started teaching. I qualified teaching in 1999, and it wasn't until 2010 when I thought, you know what, I really want to do this. I really want to illustrate for myself and do my own thing, because when you're teaching, you're obviously teaching art to kids, and you never get that time to actually do your own thing. So I thought, what can help me get into illustration? I'm seeing all this great stuff. Going to Waterstones and these beautiful books, and I really wanted to be part of that. And so I was looking around online, and I really can't recommend the London College course. It's an online course. It's
I think Annalisa's put a link in the chat for everybody. It's the Illustrating Children's Books Diploma by the London Art College. That's
right. And it's not something that's going to give you work straight away, but it's a really lovely kind of toe in to the kind of like the industry, really. And it just gives you kind of a step-by-step processes of what happens. It gives you 6 briefs, and you do them over the year. And so I started that. Traditional painting wasn't digital or anything like that, so it's just basically pen and pencil.
I was traditional too when I did it.
And that took me. And I think you have a kind of 2 or 3 year gap where you can do that, but that took me 2 years to do, and then life got in the way, and I didn't finish that until 2013. And then after that, I wanted to also find a community similar to what I wanted to do, what I wanted to believe in. So I found Twitter, and I found loads of like-minded people on there who, like Natalie, who wanted what I wanted, and that was to create my own books, and I create my own books and also illustrate for other people and see my books out there. My goal was to see my book in Waterstones. That was my goal. And so it wasn't until 2017 when I decided, kind of almost a midlife crisis. I was 40, decided, right, that's it. I'm going to quit my teaching job and take on my illustration full time.
I think as midlife crises go, that's a pretty good one. Like, you could have just bought a flashy car.
My caveat into that is that if you're thinking of doing that, make sure that you've got kind of a buffer of cash that you save up before doing something like that. So all the while I was teaching, at night I would be doing my illustration. So I'd come home from school from 6 till about 8, 9 o'clock at night, and I'd do my artwork. And then, so 2017 I went part-time, and 2018 I went full-time illustration. And around 2016 I got my agent. So it was kind of a gradual progression. It wasn't kind of like in the last couple of years, but it's over the last 10 years where I've actually developed the illustrations that I've got. Yeah,
I think it's actually quite a difficult industry to break into if you're starting from, well, I didn't go to art college properly, really, or didn't go to uni or anything. And you went to uni, but not for that, really. So it was.
Yeah, I did a teaching.
It's kind of a different thing. I know a lot of people go and do the Cambridge MA. That one seems to be quite good. That's like quite a good foothold into the industry, but it seems to take quite a long time to really get there. And also, unless you're brilliant to start off with, your work changes a lot over the time that you're working too.
I was speaking to someone the other day, and you've really got to draw through a load of work before you can get to not just to a standard of illustration, but to a standard of illustration that is sellable, and you want to buy it as well. That's and it's that doing that kind of illustration that is marketable.
Yeah, I think that's the difference, is that your work, as much as we don't want to admit it, like, your work might be absolutely great, but if no one's buying it, then it's not the right work for the market, and it's a tough thing to learn. But that I've painted things and done things in the past that everyone's like, oh, that's rubbish, and I thought it's rubbish, and it's just one of those things. It's quite subjective, isn't it? And if someone doesn't want to pay for it, then they're not going to, and you won't get anywhere. So you've got to be true to your own style, or, as my friend Steph Coleman says, your visual voice, which I think is a nicer way of putting it. But you've got to really look at and see what other people are doing, and see what's selling as well.
That's what the great thing about Twitter is that you can get to see lots of people are posting, and and Colour Collective. I know Penny's watching.
I love Colour Collective. Penny's amazing for starting that.
Set up Colour Collective, and that was a really great resource for people sharing their work and getting feedback, talking about your work, and it gave you a structure in your week. Like, I really want to get this work out there, And the thing about Twitter is, of course, everyone's looking at Twitter,
Yeah.
and so therefore you don't know who's watching or looking. And one day there might be an agent watching, there might be a publisher watching, who might pick up on that piece of work. I know quite a few illustrators who've just done one piece, and an agent's gone, I really love that. Can I rep you? You know. And
the good thing about it is, I remember that when it first started, I was doing it. I did it every single week. I think I ended up having, I think I maybe missed one or two, but I ended up having like almost 52 pieces for that 1 year. And that's one, is a huge body of work to put in a portfolio, and two, you develop quite a lot as well.
Yeah, I mean that was the trigger. That was the trigger. I was doing a lot of illustration, and I was building my folio, and I think that's something we're going to touch on in a minute. But I was building my folio, and I thought I want to do picture books, but I also expand my folio as well. So I wanted to do young fiction.
Yeah.
So it was a colour collective that gave me that kind of trigger to. I started with the Roald Dahl covers.
Oh,
so
I love those. You've got a load of them, haven't you? How many have you got? Like 14 or something?
Yeah, I think I'm about 3 short. So I did all the covers for Roald Dahl.
Yeah, they were really good.
So there's another little tip if people want to build up their kind of black and white, their young fiction work, is to do cover work. Yeah. So I think that kind of leads us quite nicely into the cover design work that we've got. I thought Natalie and I both wanted to kind of share the process of what we do. So I thought I've got my Lizzie and Lucky. I've worked with Puffin on, and I'll show you that from inception, kind of like the sample work I did for it, all the way through to the final book. So Natalie, what did you want to show?
I'm doing a few books. I've got the Griffin Gate cover, I've got the Strange Worlds 1 and 2 covers, and I've got a sneak peek for the back of Strange Worlds 2, which hasn't been released yet, and Annalise's book, The Night Silver Promise, as well. So she's not turned her microphone off. She unmuted herself for that little shout out. So I'll go through those. I think you'll find when looking through both of our presentations that we both work completely differently, and I'm probably not going to go into as much depth as Tim is because we work so differently, but I'll kind of give an overview of how I do it. So I don't know, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first? I don't mind.
You can go first, Natalie.
I'll go first, yeah. Could I have my presentation, please?
First slide.
First slide, please. Hopefully I'll do better than Boris. Okay, so this is the Griffin Gate line work, the first book. And the first thing you'll notice is that I work in loads of different colours. And for me, I actually work on the iPad for a lot of my line work. And for me, the different colours help me to kind of visualise the different depths. So the gate will be at the front, and then the houses will be kind of the mid-ground, and then the darker stuff is at the forest. So that just kind of helps me visually differentiate it. I know some people, when they're looking at art designers and art directors, don't like the different colours, so sometimes I'll just kind of take the colour out and just give it to them as black and white. But when I'm drawing, it helps me to kind of visualise the different areas that I'll need to be painting. If you notice in the bottom, this is different from the final cover because there are 2 little icons. There's a recompass, which is in the book, and the spyglass as well, which is another thing in the book. And in the original brief, Julianne Murray, who's the designer at Barrington Stoke, she sent me through a whole thick brief and kind of little mock-up design of how she wanted it, just very loosely. And she wanted those in the bottom, and I tried it, and then when I sent it off to her, she decided that actually it looked a lot better without it, and I think it does as well. But none of the things get wasted. We ended up using the spyglass as a chapter header, I think, in the first book. So it can all be reused if you take it out and paint it. So next slide, please. So this is the background, and I tend to work from the back to the front unless I get really bored and I decide to paint something different. If there's a lot of background, sometimes it's fun to paint something different just to keep you kind of interested. But with this one, I painted the background to try and keep the tone of the image kind of consistent throughout. And I've got a little note here to mention a little extension in Photoshop called Magic Picker. I think it's called Photoshop Panels Magic Picker or something, and it's amazing. It's basically a little add-on that you get with Photoshop, and you turn it on, and you can lock the tone of the color that you're painting with. So every other color that you pick within that tonal range stays quite similar, and you don't end up with like a horrible red next to a really, really cool green or something, and that's really what you want. So that's a good one to use. Next slide, please. So this is the one with the houses, and in the brief, I was asked to keep it quite monochromatic, and the colours need to be very similar. I think that the colours work quite well with the Golden Gate, which is what I painted right at the end and what you'll see. But there's a lot of detail in the houses, and what you can see is that even though you don't see all of the houses on the final cover, I painted right to the edge of the canvas because it's good practice. And also I've been asked, go on.
I was going to say that if you want to mention bleeds.
Yeah, bleeds, hang on. So I've got a horrible cough. I've got a cup of honey and lemon here to stop me coughing my guts up. But I don't know how Tim works, but personally, when a brief gets sent through, it'll usually specify the format. So a lot of the books are B format portraits, and they'll give you the measurements in millimeters. So this one is 130 millimeters by 198 millimeters, plus a 3 millimeter bleed on all sides. So, and this one's actually specified lead files to be supplied at no less than 400 DPI, which is unusual because most of the time it's 300 DPI. But when I work, I set my initial document size to the size that's been asked for. I usually go in and like double it or triple it or something, because otherwise I work in a lot of texture and with a lot of kind of textured brushes, and I like to put a lot of detail in. And sometimes if you don't work on a big size, you don't manage to get all that detail in. So all my documents are absolutely whopping. I've never had anyone complain yet, because I think they managed to use a lot of it in marketing, which is a nice bonus for them. But they are really huge files. I don't know how you work with yours, Tim. Do you keep yours that big? Do you work to the right size?
I usually give a 2 centimeter bleed on around everything. Yeah. So
yeah.
Because with fiction books, sometimes they'll change them into hardbacks, or with picture books, they'll go into board books. So you need to make sure you've got an extra bit to go around all the covers, and of course the inside.
I sometimes add a bit of extra bleed on just to be on the safe side.
Yeah.
But with these houses, because like Tim was saying, sometimes they change things. Sometimes you paint it and they don't like it, or you paint it and they want to move things around, and you can never really tell what something's going to look like until you've finished it. It's a really good idea to try and paint things in their entirety behind other things. So a lot of the things I paint will take up a lot more space than they need to, because if there's something else in front of it gets moved or it needs to go somewhere else, I don't have to worry about repainting extra bits on the sides or the edges or whatever. So that's the full. The houses just go all the way to the edge. So
I mean, I do something similar. Is that when I'm doing my roughs, I'll draw out the whole figure, and I'll just mask the area. That's if there's another figure standing in front of that person, I'll mask out so I can see, but it's still there.
That's good practice, because like you don't know if someone's going to move it around, even just a couple of millimeters, because it doesn't look quite right, and then you've got to paint that extra couple of millimeters. So it might take you a little bit of extra time in the short term, but it'll pay off in the long term if someone moves things around.
Also, they can, or individual things can be used for marketing as well. So you don't want to have to try and paint it when it's already there. So
that's exactly right. That's what happened with the spyglass. Like, we took the spyglass out, but I painted it anyway, and I don't know if it was used anywhere else, but it was definitely used as chapter headers. So it was quite useful in the end. Next slide, please. So when I added the phone box in the Griffin Gate, I don't know if everyone's read the Griffin Gate. I don't want to give anything away, but you should read it because it's amazing. But the brief, as I said earlier on, was monochrome. So when I painted the phone box, I painted it red, and then I put a blue layer over the top of it to kind of keep it with the monochrome look. And when I sent it off, I sent both versions to the designer, because she'd asked for the monochrome version, but I wasn't sure if she wanted a monochrome telephone box, because I don't think there are any blue telephone boxes in Britain. So in the end, we decided that it looked better red, and because it's a kind of key plot device, it doesn't hurt to have it stand out, and I think it looks better have it kind of bright and bold on the page anyway. So next slide, please. So after I painted the background, I painted the gate and laid it on top. And I took the gate right to the edge of the document. And when you see the next, not just yet, but when you see the next slide, you'll see that there's a little bit of the edges that have been cropped off, and that was for the bleed. So it's when you're painting covers and designing them, you must take into account all the bleed and all the extra bits that are going to get chopped off, because if I just painted not quite enough, you wouldn't see the edge of the gate. It would just be chopped off and look a bit strange. So I sent this off to Julie and Murray at Barrington Stoke, and next slide please. She adds the text in for me. So sometimes the designers add the text in themselves, sometimes they ask you to hand letter it. I've done both, but I think this one might be a custom font, I'm not quite sure. So Julie and Murray, she did it herself for that one. So that's the finished one, and you can see that compared to the last image, the edges are a little bit cropped, and that was the bleed being taken off. So that's the finished cover for the Griffin Gate. Next slide please. So this is the Strange Worlds book 1 cover, and this one was a fun one because there was a lot of, there wasn't very much, there was a big brief, but it wasn't a tight brief. So when I got sent through the information for it, Sam Perrett at Hachette, who's lovely, very, very good designer, he sent me through a kind of like a little sketch of rough placement. I think the sketch had the chest and the girl, and maybe a kind of slight indication of where the tentacles might be in the suitcase. So there wasn't a huge amount of information, but what he sent through was a lot of information about what he wanted included, which is useful. But he said, because I'd not read the book, he needed to give me that information, and it was things like, can we have some tentacles, can we have some tropical vines, he told me that there would be a jewel world, a jungle world, and an underwater world. So I thought that it would be quite good fun to let the tentacles take over a little bit. Actually, the jewel world in the book is my favorite world. So I don't know if LD's listening, but that's
I was going to say, it's quite difficult to, just kind of going back to what you're talking about, how much information that you're given. It's sometimes quite difficult when you're given a brief. You're not given the whole story. So working out, how did you work out the character in terms of, did they give you what you would like, or?
I think, I don't have the brief in front of me, but I think I remember a description of the character, not necessarily her characteristics, but how she would look. So might have said she was looking determined or something, and she had curly brown hair and was wearing bright clothes. So that was it. There's not a huge amount. It depends really. It depends on the designer and the book. But for this one, there wasn't a huge amount of information to go on, which I think is really good. Sometimes I feel like if there's something specific about the character that needs to be included, like they've got a birthmark or they've got a specific type of style hair, then that's fine. But otherwise, you get to kind of think it up yourself. So with this brief, Sam told me that the world of Five Lights, which is kind of like a big main hub world in the story, is like a Spanish feeling world. So I went and researched vintage Spanish suitcases, and that's very similar to one that I found that looked really, really nice. And I was talking to LD about this the other day, and they said that I've read the book, but I couldn't remember. And I said, do you specify in the book what the suitcases look like? Because what I was trying to get at was, does the suitcase look like the interior of the world? And they said that they don't. They described what the suitcase looked like in that, I think this one might have been pink and gold, I'm not quite sure. But from their perspective, it's more important to get the feel of the world rather than the intricate kind of the exact look of the suitcase right. So that's, I think from my perspective, that's good, because it gives me a bit more freedom to kind of have a bit of a play with it and have a bit of fun with it. And so all the things that I added in were asked for, but not really in the way, they weren't specified. They don't have to look like that how I've done them. So I think Sam didn't do a huge amount of movement. Like, it was kind of a one-shot thing with the line work, which was quite good.
but it allows for you to put your touch on it, which is
yeah. I think that it's important to have that freedom if you're going to be an illustrator. I think the publishers want that. They don't if they. Sorry, I've just seen a question. The title of this book is The Strange World Travel Agency. The publishers, if they wanted you to just do a carbon copy, just plain cover, they wouldn't hire an illustrator. They'd get someone in house to do it. You know, the reason they get people to illustrate these covers is because they like the way your work looks and they like the way you do things. So this one was a really fun one. And
the author of this, Natalie?
Sorry?
Who's the author of that?
This is L.D. Lipinski. And there's a second one coming out soon. You'll see the second cover in a minute. But yeah, there wasn't a huge amount of instruction about where things should go, so I just kind of went wild with it. And I think to start with, there weren't clouds spilling out of the chest. There was water and fish, but we changed it and just kind of modified it. And I think a few colours were modified. And an interesting thing is that when I was painting it and sketching it, nobody mentioned adding there's a little penguin that's attached to the bag, and I just chucked it in because I thought it was fun. But actually, I don't want to give away too much, but there's a mechanism in the book where you get things by giving things, and the penguin could have been one of those things that was given. So I know that's very cryptic, but you need to read the book. Sorry, I'm not going to give it all away. So I think that's one of my favorite covers that I've done. It was really exciting, and it was really good fun, and I did really enjoy doing the tentacles. So let's move on. The next slide, I think, is the second book. So
these are all Photoshop, aren't they? Or are they all?
These are all Photoshop. So the line work for these is in Procreate, because as I'm very fond of mentioning, I like sitting on my backside. So it's very easy to do that with a tablet in front of the television. So line work in Procreate and then painting in Photoshop. So this I don't think anybody's seen the back cover for the second book. This is The Edge of the Ocean. So for this particular one, the character was already designed, although there's a new character that I hadn't painted before, which is Jonathan, who is behind Flick. And I know that this one is set in a kind of piratical world. It's quite nautical. So the suitcase for this one I designed to look sort of like a treasure chest, traveling chest kind of thing. So again, I haven't read the book, so I don't know yet, but LD seems quite happy with it. So if she's happy, I'm happy.
I think it looks so.
Thank you. So yeah, it was just kind of the brief for this one was similar to the first one, although I think there might have been a bit more information about the placement of the ship, because it had to be quite a specific shape to get the title to fit, if I remember rightly. It was ages ago that I painted it. So yes, this is an exclusive. The back cover is an exclusive. It's not been shown yet, but I did get permission, so I'm not going to get told off. And I really enjoyed this one. This was really good. I think for the back cover, I think it was very loose. I'm not even sure that it was specified what I should do with the back cover. I think I was just kind of let free to do what I wanted to do, which was really nice. But because it's an underwater world, I just decided to kind of design a load of fish and glowy foreign plants and things. Although I do think that the mermaid was described, so I'm not sure it's a mermaid. I don't know if I should be saying that. I think it might be a mer person. I don't know. I might be getting it wrong here because it was a long time ago. And I haven't read the book, and that's another thing I think we'll talk about in a minute. It's hard to get things right when you haven't read the book, and that's where a good designer will help, because they may not also have read the book, but they'll have read big chunks of it or enough to kind of to inform you with what you need to do.
I remember talking to Jason Cockcroft when he first did the Harry Potter series. The first book's out, and because Harry Potter was such a massive craze thing, he was on such a they couldn't give any information out at all, so he had one sentence that he could work from.
No, it's no use. I mean, did a good job, but that's no use. That's not helpful.
Maybe it's not helpful, but as we're going to discuss, it's how much information that we get and how we have to work through those the roughs to get to the point where what designers are happy with.
I think I had a couple of roughs for this one. If I remember rightly, I did the front cover. I think I needed to slightly re-angle the sail a little bit, or make it a bit bigger or a bit smaller. I can't quite remember. And then for the back one, you've got to remember to leave enough space for the blurb. And actually, a lot of the time, they might not have a blurb, so they give you a kind of rough idea about how much space you need to leave. And then you just got to kind of do your best, and you've got to make sure to leave enough space for things like the barcode and copyright information and all that kind of stuff, and the price on the back. So I think that goes on the bottom left as we're looking at it just now.
And the name will be on the front where the waterfall is. Yeah,
so there's a gap for LD's name, and then the title goes in the. Actually, I think I made the sail too big, because there's a little blurb on the front from another author who recommends the books, and I think I didn't leave enough room for that the first time. But Sam, being the amazing designer he is, just got it in there somehow. I don't quite know how he did it, but yeah, so that's those two covers. And then next slide, please. Can't remember what it is. This is Annalise's book. So
another book
everyone should pre-order it, please. Thank you. So this was a really fun brief to do. Actually, it was quite an exciting one. It was quite energetic, and what you'll see here is it's the foil layer is highlighted. So when I painted it, Jamie Gregory, who's the designer for this, who's amazing as well, I don't know if he expected me to put quite as much foil on it as I did, but he was just like, yeah, just add the foil. So I did, and literally everything has got foil on it. So Annalise's name is foil. It's white. So everything that's white on this cover, including the spine, I think, is foiled, apart from, I don't think the cloud on the right hand side is foiled, but there's an outline of the cloud. So
it's really striking. This is the most striking I've seen. I think it's, as we mentioned earlier, that the more striking a book, the better it is, and especially in this COVID world. And then there's lots of online sales and things, and if it can catch the eye to the buyer, all the better, I think. And I think this one,
if it stands out on the shelf and online, that's only going to help.
Yeah.
But this one I think does stand out. I really enjoyed painting it, but the foil is everywhere. It's in all those little white sparks that's foiled around the edges of everything, the flames, and there's what's called a cockroach at the top, which is the back of that is foiled. And I think I went through there are a couple of versions, gold and silver foil, Annalise's saying, a couple of versions of this. One where I had kind of intricately lettered the word night silver. When I got the brief, it was really in depth. Actually, I haven't read the book. We'll talk about that again in a minute. But I haven't read the book. But Jamie sent through a really, really in-depth briefing document with loads of information. So that really helped. And I felt that it was it needed like an enamel kind of feel to it. So when I was researching kind of pocket watches and old clocks and things, there were lots of enamel and filigree and all that kind of thing. So I tried to kind of capture that. But there's a limit to what you can do, because the image, while it's fairly sizable, it's not that big, and a lot of the detail ends up getting lost if you go too crazy. So you kind of have to give the impression of loads of detail, but not put tons and tons in. But I did come up with a really cool pattern that fits around the outside of the clock, which I think went down so well they asked me to use it on everything else. I haven't shown the back cover yet because it's not public, but the spine has got the pattern on it, which I kind of invented. It's not a repeating pattern. It's just kind of like you draw the squiggles where you think they'll look the best, basically. So yeah, this was a good one, and you should definitely all go and buy it. I think that might be the last slide of mine. Maybe next slide. No, that's the last one. That's me done.
Excellent. And that your work is for cover design is more mid-grade, isn't it?
Yeah. Yours, I think yours is a bit younger. So
yeah. So I'm just gonna show Lizzie and Lucky and Mystery of the Missing Puppies. It's out with Puffin in March. I've shown a few things online. So I'm just going to share a PDF I've got of it. Slightly different way of doing things than Natalie, but it'll be self-explanatory as we go along. So hopefully you should be able to see the front cover. So this was the complete front cover as it goes to press. It's got lots of lovely, it's embellished with glitter, and it's and all the oranges glitter and things like that. And the background is embossed as well. So
who's your designer, Tim?
My designer was Mandy Norman and Annabelle Jones at Puffin, and they are incredible. Mandy Jones, as all designers are, they are just like in a league of their own in terms of they just elevate the stuff that you do.
Yeah, they do.
They really should have their names on the covers of books as well.
They should.
That's probably something we might want to cover at some point as well.
Yeah.
So I was really pleased to get my name on, and I think because of Young Fiction, it's because I've done all the artwork inside as well. So with Young Fiction, there's usually between about 45 and 50 illustrations to do. So the second book to this has got 50. It's a little bit more intricate and detailed, but this was the setup to the series that they wanted. So I'm just going to go through what we did to start with. So when they ask what comes through for a little bit of information, my agent will email me and say, Puffin have got this series, it's looking really fab, are you interested? They'd really love to see some samples of, and they'd give me a little description of what the main character looked like, what she wears, as I've written down here, and the kind of person that she is. So this is a story which is really close to my heart. It's by Megan Ricks, and it's about a family who are profoundly deaf, so they wear hearing aids, and it's about dogs in particular, which is another thing close to my heart. So it was like the perfect project for me, which I absolutely love. So I kind of poured my soul into it a little bit, and certainly into the samples. So I went a little bit mad with the samples, and they said, can we have the characters? Can we have the secondary characters as well? So I'll show you Mum and Dad in a minute. And can we have some pets and some animals? And certainly, can you show Lucky, who's going to be part of the 101 Dalmatians book? So that's her kind of idea of what she wants. So she wants the dog, and so I had to show the Dalmatian and show some movement as well. So when you're doing samples, and if you're busting to get the job, it's a good idea to go. For me, it's going to go overboard in terms of what the character looks like, how the character sits and stands and walks, and to give a kind of, not only for me, but to give the designer, the publisher, an idea of what the character is and what she's like.
Tim, sorry to interrupt, but do you do different like looks for your characters and send them through, or do you pick one and send it through? Because I find when I've done it in the past, it's the one that I like the least that gets picked.
Really? Yeah, sometimes I'll send through a range of different characters. Sometimes, most of the time, it's kind of like that innate feeling of, I know that's right, and that feels right for me. Yeah. And that feels right to the character that's described. So I'll show you in a minute the brief I was given. So here are the samples that I was asked to do. So Ted was a British Indian, Lucky the Dalmatian, so I showed in different poses. Mum and Dad are also profoundly deaf, so which I didn't know at the time while sampling, but they will also have hearing aids on. Dad had, the description was, Dad had hands like grapefruit, he had a big beard. The mum was a lot shorter. She had funky purple hair. She had a hairband. So all these little things I could write down, and I had to keep going back to make sure that I was getting it correct. These are the characters, the animals that are also involved in the story. So I sketched those up too. And then, so Iggy and actually Boo, the parrot, they play a bigger role in the second part, but Daisy is a main role in the first book.
So cute.
And then, so when asking to sample, Annabelle Jones, who's brilliant in terms of just working out what goes where, she picks goes to your folio and says, these are the images that I really like. There's one of the Roald Dahl covers that I did, and it was the Roald Dahl covers that I did in terms of just building up my folio that got me this job. So
Yeah.
people out there going, I don't know why I'm doing it. No one's spotting my work, or no one's seeing what I'm doing. Honestly, there are eyes out there who will see what you're doing. So do keep going. Really do keep going. So she kind of picked out the kind of things that she liked about each image. So the vibrancy, the cuteness, because this book is for 6 to 9 year olds, so a lot younger than yours now.
Yeah, mine are a bit older than that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is, I don't know if you can read or see as much, but this is basically the layout of the book. The format was standard 129 by 198 and has a 5mm bleed. The type was already set, and then Annabelle kind of scribbled ideas of what she wants. The character description: Lizzie had brown hair and eyes, lucky to be a Dalmatian puppy with a green ribbon bow. Perhaps the dog napper, who is part of the book, can be short and round and looks slightly scary. So that's pretty much what we're given. The concept of the book as well. So Lizzie and Lucky hiding in the grass, spying on the dog napper, a holding device of a heart. So this was an idea that we talked through. So I then went ahead, once I'd got the job from my samples, I went ahead and produced just a range of covers, which they
I don't do this, I have to say. I don't know if it's just because I work for a slightly older market or because I just don't work like that, but you've done such a range there. I love them.
It's I really like the bottom right one with Boo.
Yeah, I like that one.
Rabbits and stuff. But I think in terms of, as we go back to marketing, sometimes there's a fear of putting too much information into the cover.
Yeah.
For this, I think it was eye-catching. I think the designers and the publishers want this for children to be able to dress up quite simply on World Book Days and things like that. So if you've got a redress and you've got a shirt and you've got a badge and a bag, that's all you need, and you can put your hair in bunches and things like that.
Yeah.
So I did a range of covers for them to look at and choose from, and then I did a range of colours. So I went through about 9 or 10 different colours for them to choose, and what we'd settled on. So we'd kind of settled on the dog napper in the background with Lizzie and Lucky running through the front, and then there's a lot of back and two for each one, and we kind of ended up settling with kind of a texture of the brushes that I use, and then the blurb on the back. So we moved the dog napper to the back. So the main focus is the main characters, and because it's a series, and as you'll see in the cover for the second one is out as well. These two are obviously the main part of the story. And then just a few exclusives. So this was the insides. So how I do that is that there'll be the pencil roughs. So I'll do all the pencil roughs first, and they'll give me probably about 4 weeks to do that, 4 or 5 weeks to do all the pencil roughs.
How many was it in the internals?
Sorry?
How many did you have to do?
For this one, there's 45. Not necessarily complete spreads. This is a complete spread.
Yeah.
To fit in with the type as well. But there can be spots which are smaller, kind of just figures, or there might be little vignettes which are kind of like a little bit of background, or an animal is involved as well. So there's another one like that, which is kind of like a vignette. So once they've gone through all the edit and checked all the roughs, then they'll send them all back to me with some notes, and then I'll have a load of notes to go through to correct stuff or change stuff. And then I can go to finals in terms of colouring these up. And these are all done in grayscale on Photoshop. And you have to work out what will print well as well. So everything is in kind of 80% black and less than that. And then this is the book, and it's publishing in the next 3 weeks, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. So
It's lovely.
some early books through in a couple of weeks' time. So that's kind of the process of from sample straight through to
we should probably talk a little bit about how we don't get to read the books a lot of the time when we do the covers.
I got to read the book for that one.
You did?
I got sent, not for the originally when I got the samples. I didn't have the book. I just had a brief description of what they wanted to see, which was the characters. And then once I had the job, they sent through the whole book so I could actually read it through.
I did have the Griffin Gate. I can't remember if I got sent them through at the same time, but the briefs, like the cover and the internal briefs. I did the internal illustrations for Griffin Gate as well, and I did read the book for that one. The Barrington Stoke books are shorter and easier to read, so it didn't take me a long time to read it, which was quite good for when I was doing the internals. But for Strange Worlds and for the Knights of the Promise, I hadn't read them at the time. Yes, there's an internal. So I did read it for the Barrington Stoke book, but for Annalise's book and for L.D. Lebinsky's book, I hadn't read them. When I came to do the second book cover for The Edge of the Ocean, I had read the first one, so I had a better idea of characters, and I was kind of into the groove of the way they looked and the way that world that needed to look. So that was slightly better, but it's really, really tough to do a cover for a book that you haven't read. And I will give a tip that I don't know if it's a good tip or not, but I do covers. I recover classic books, and I will let you into a little secret. I have not read very many of them. So what I do is I go onto Wikipedia, and I go onto things like Spark Notes, and I try and use what other people have written about the books to inform how I do the cover. So that kind of, it's like a brief, I suppose. You have to pick out information that the designer sends you to make good decisions, good cover decisions. For instance, one of the ones that I haven't read was I've forgotten what it's called. It's the We've Always Lived in the Castle, I think it's called. And I haven't read the book. Probably never going to read the book, but I managed to do an all right cover for it, which I think got me some work. So if you want to practice doing covers and getting the essence of a book, don't try and recover a book that you haven't read, and try and pick up the kind of information. So on things like, I think Spark Notes is one of them. There's a couple of them. If you Google the book and then like themes, and something will come up with a website, and it'll have someone who has had homework in the past where they have to compare and contrast this book, will have put up Spark Notes for this book, and it'll give you the symbolism and the themes and kind of rundowns of the characters. And granted, they might have a bit more information in them than a brief would have if it comes through and you're not able to read the book, but it's still a good practice. So there are a few of the ones on my website, the book covers, a few of them I haven't read. I think I might have read Lord of the Flies a really long time ago, but I forgot everything about it, so it's the same as not reading it. So that's good practice. That's what I do anyway. It's my top tip.
I'm gonna go to questions if that's okay, because we've only got 12 minutes left and we've got quite a few questions. So I'm gonna start with the ones that have been voted for the most. So the first one is, what are your top don'ts when it comes to cover design? So do you have some things that you ought not to do?
I was gonna say too many colours, but then I looked at the Strange World books and I was like, no, that's not right. There's lots of colours in those. Yeah, loads of colours there.
When you're, I've got one, which is my learning from my own lessons, is when you're designing a cover, and the publishers pretty much across the board will ask for it to be done in 300 DPI, which pixels per inch. So I did a whole cover in 72 DPI, and then realised it was really blurry and horrible when I blew it up and made it bigger. And this was after I'd spent 2 or 3 days on it, and then realise,
feeling.
I've got to do it all again because
I've got another one. I don't know if anybody else would have done this. This is very specific to Photoshop. If you save your Photoshop document as a PSD, always tick as a copy, because if you don't, sometimes it does its own thing and saves the image flat, so you'll lose all your layers. I don't know if that's a thing that anybody else has done, but I nearly cried once when I did it.
A good idea in terms of about Photoshop or anything else like that, I think is a good idea is to really make sure that you've got as much information from your designer as you possibly can get in terms of design. Have we nailed the character as best we can? Does it need more information? And just make sure that you're really happy with what you're going to do before you do it. Because
I think it's difficult to pin down like a specific don't for each cover, because each cover will be so different, and it depends on what the publisher wants, what the designer's after, and something that you might not do for one cover, you might do loads of in another cover. So it's difficult to pin down something specific.
And also, you might want to do a cover that looks really fab, but actually doesn't pinpoint what marketing, which is like really the influential part of publishing, what really wants, and will it sell? And if it's sellable, and will it appeal to that market audience? And that's like a massive part of publishing that obviously we don't really get involved in.
No, I think that's interesting. We were talking about this the other day. It's difficult for us to know because a lot of the time we're brought in at the end. So the book's written, it's about to go to print, and everybody's been aware of it for such a long time, and we are right in at the end, and we don't get a huge amount of time or a huge amount of information. And sometimes that's good, and sometimes you've got to be aware that there's so many other things going on behind the scenes that you've no idea about. The marketing stuff is huge, and the designer will know all about that. So if you've got a question, ask your designer. You know, the designers are amazing. We need to talk more about the designers because they should have their names on the covers. Really, all my designers are fab, and they, like you said earlier, Tim, they've got like a different way of working. It's like a different. They are illustrators, a lot of them, I think, and they do produce their own work, but they've got like graphic design skills with a Z on the end. They're amazing. They're really good.
Okay, so for top tips on things not to do, but I've kind of swapped it around to things maybe to do. Check your DPIs, save as a copy so you don't go flat. More info, more better, and ask your designer.
Yeah.
I think having a good relationship with your designer is key, honestly, because they'll know everything that they need to know about the book and everything that you need to know about the book, even if they haven't managed to get it across in the first email. You can always pick their brains later, and they'll be able to speak to the author too.
Just don't add things that you really want in it that anything to do with it, which I've done before as well. It's cool.
Yeah. You're like, but I really like ducks.
Yeah. It was like
I just added loads of them.
Yeah, it's a waste of time because I wanted it, but you know it just gets binned, you know. So it's kind of it's not really helpful time wise.
Okay, so I have another question. So can Procreate be used for professionally finished coloured work?
Yes,
That's
it can.
Hannah.
I have just started a card business called Papered, and I am designing and painting all of my cards in Procreate, which I don't know if a lot of people do it. I know there is a children's book. I don't know who's done it. This is terrible, but they have painted the whole book in Procreate. The problem with Procreate is that you're very limited in sizes and layers. So if you work in a lot of layers, you won't be able to use a lot of layers. And the sizes, again, you know, there's nothing wrong with sending it to print. All that kind of stuff is fine. It's just that because the processing power of an iPad is much more limited than a PC or a Mac or something, then you just don't have the oomph behind it to kind of do the same things that Procreate does. Photoshop does, sorry.
The best thing I find like to do, iPads are great, and Procreate's amazing because you know it's like
it's getting better.
And Procreate's £10, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really cheap.
Whereas Photoshop, you're paying a subscription, which is another whole world in itself.
Don't even get started.
I can do roughs. I can sit on the couch. Sitting at your desk all day is really bad for your posture. So sitting
like a little goblin at the moment. I'm only just sitting chatting.
or walking, you know, standing up doing it. You can do that on iPad, and then you can save it to a cloud, which is you know, your save system or hard drive, and then you can transfer it, put it onto Dropbox or Google Drive. You can transfer it, and then, like I do, I pick it up at my desk, because that's my working process. So I don't go to full color on an iPad, because it just feels a bit alien to me. You're different. I know you're different.
I've got more used to it. I think since I've started doing the cards, I've started feeling a bit more comfortable with going to full color. And before the pandemic, I would go and sit in a coffee shop and do some painting, which was quite nice, because it's living at home, obviously, and working at home. It's quite isolating sometimes. So getting out and about is quite nice. But I think there are benefits and drawbacks to both Procreate and Photoshop. I think it really depends on the project that you're doing it in. Like if it's an entire book, probably not.
I'm just going to flag it there as well. I mean, we only use Procreate and Photoshop for publishers because of the speed these days. Although there are still traditional artists out there who are unbelievably amazing. Yeah,
we're glossing over the traditional artists, and this is terrible.
I was speaking to, I don't know if you probably will know, Fiona Lumbers. She's a traditional artist, and I remember her talking about a book that she did. She did a spread 4 or 5 times because they wanted something changed.
Yeah.
She had to read it. The quick thing about Procreate,
if someone had done that.
She's amazing.
She is.
That's the reason why more and more publishers are going towards a more digital approach. But then with the digital approach, you've got to start thinking about, does it look traditional?
And again, that's another thing to speak to your designer and your art director about. Do they want a traditional look, or do they want something that looks digital? Because there are benefits to both, and it depends on the subject as well, the subject of the book. Some of the more kind of lyrical picture books like a traditional look, like more watercolory, gouache kind of color pencil look, and some of them which are like Super Potato, for instance, doesn't look in any way traditional. It's very digital.
And also Photoshop and Procreate, they're not the only tools out there. You can get free applications too.
And cheaper ones.
A lot cheaper ones. I mean, Manga is like £50 for the whole lot, and that's brilliant. But there's I can't think of off the top of my head the free ones, but there are out there. They're quite easy to Google.
Some of them look very similar to Photoshop as well in like layout, so you're not kind of lost when you kind of open it up. I have not used any of them, so I can't vouch for any of them, but I do know they exist.
But if you're starting out, you want to start digitally, don't buy anything. I mean, I bought a Wacom pad, and it was secondhand from eBay. It cost me £10. I drew on that. Before that, I was scanning my traditional work in. So don't think that to become an illustrator you have to buy all these gadgets. You don't. 10 quid for a secondhand Wacom bamboo, which is a pad, and that was it for me digitally. But traditionally, pencil and paper and scan your work in and send it. That's really need a lot more affinity. That's one. Yeah, really good.
Fabulous. Well, we could have listened to you talk all day, to be perfectly honest. I found it really, really interesting just to see what the process is and just to see, how you guys write, design to a brief, and how you don't even read the book. And this is the first time that Natalie and I have seen each other. We've had a little chat on the DMs, but I was so excited when I saw her face in the green room. It's really quite amazing to think that, you do work quite intimately with authors on their work, but you don't necessarily get to sit down and especially not now, have a coffee and a chat. We will do that, Natalie, one day when the world is back to normal. Definitely. Well, thank you so much to both of you. You've had so many questions. We only managed to get 2. Would it be okay if people really want their questions answered if they seek you out on Twitter?
Yeah, I'm going to say, if you want to drop a message, my messages are open. My direct messages are open. So if you want to drop me anything.
So we can either do them publicly or we can do them privately, whatever.
Brilliant. Yeah, so if you do if you do tweet Natalie or Tim on Twitter, use the hashtag Hulkfronts and then know what you're on about, and that'll be fabulous. So thank you both so much, and thank you to Jane and Tony, who were our backroom admins for this session, and thank you to all of the other volunteers that have helped to bring the Hulkfronts over the past 2 days together. So yeah, thank you so much for your insight. It's been a pleasure. I've learned so much. Thank you.